have a question for you. Have you ever been kicked in the head so hard that you wanted to change your career? Was it necessary to be kicked in the head to change your career? This episode is going to tell you what it did for me to change my whole life and what it took for me to have a new cure for long-term chronic headaches. So again, I started out working on the racetrack in South Carolina with young thoroughbreds. I mean, and that's a recipe for injury right there in itself. I don't care if you're the groom, the trainer, the rider, everything, but it's so excited, and the vibrant energy, this fun energy of the galloping racehorses, and just being around that animal is a dream, right? It's a dream to be around horses that have that much energy, but they're pretty dangerous at times. I mean, you just have to know how to manage yourself. And as veterinarians, you know, we have to get in so close, and we have to be right there personal with these young horses that, you know, they're just trained to be outside and galloping, and they're not really trained to be your pet lying in your lap going to sleep, even if it's a young horse. So one day I had to do a lot of tube worming and scoping. And if you know what that means, that's passing a tube into the nose. Back in those days, we would put in mineral oil and water to keep them from being dehydration. And then sometimes when they would run, they'd start coughing, or when they would train, they would cough. So we'd have to pass an endoscope in their nose too. And a restraint device that we use in horses that's very safe, if you know how to use it, is called a twitch. And the twitch is a rope on the end of a long stick, and that twitch is put on the horse's nose, and it actually covers an acupuncture point that I found out later in years. And that acupuncture point is calming. It also gives you a way to position the head. So those things are restraint devices that we can use. And back in those days, we used that more because we did not use tranquilizers. When a horse is breathing rapidly, we need to see the function of the airway. So we can't really sedate them, or we can't evaluate the function of the airway. So we try to do a lot of restraint devices, pass the tube quickly, which I can promise you I have learned to do that quickly now. Read the images and decide what to do. So of course I had several horses that morning to pass the scope on and pass the stomach tube. So I had already done the stomach tube. Those horses had left. I was feeling a little beat up. I get some horses after they worked, and we pass the endoscope into the upper airway through the nose, and they pulled the twitch off of the horse. Well, that horse decided at that moment to take its front legs and reach out and connect with the stall gate, which reached out and connected with my head. That proceeded to knock me out on the ground. And I quickly, whatever quickly was dragged away, got up, and of course, being a young girl amongst men, I decided, hey, guess what? I'm okay. Leave me alone. I'm fine. Well, it ended up that I had what's called a migraine stroke. I didn't know it because I was semi-conscious, but thought I was okay, and was in the hospital for a few days from that particular episode. I got out of the hospital. They told me that I could potentially have migraines. I had never had migraines before in my life. Well, I continued to work as, horse vets do. We just work through everything. And once I got this headache, and I said, where's it, what am I going to do? So, of course, back then I took some, whatever we had, Advil or whatever was back then. It did not go away. And that was like maybe on a Thursday. Friday, it did not go away. It was such a bad headache. Of course, again, being a young horse vet, I did not go to the doctor or the hospital. I called a friend of mine, and she's like, here, I have this for my headache, take it, whatever that was, I don't know, but it didn't work. And so she said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to find somebody that's going to get rid of this headache. And she was an older lady friend of mine in the town where I lived. I had made friends with her. Again, speaking about our community and who helps you. And so I was like, I don't care. I was to the point where I was trying to sit in a steam room, putting ice packs on my head. It was such a severe headache. And in retrospect, I probably should have gone to the hospital based on the history, but it had been long enough from the original injury that I just decided I had a headache. I had the migraine that they told me was coming. So I crawled in the back seat of her car, and she took me somewhere in North Augusta, South Carolina, to a Chinese man, that's all I remember, because I could barely open my eyes, who did acupuncture on me. I had never heard of acupuncture to any extent. I'd never had it in my entire life, of course. And he started with my head, and then he ended up by my little toe. He put the needle in, and my headache was gone. I am telling you, it was gone instantly. So I was so ecstatic, this headache that I couldn't even open my eyes, I couldn't drive, I couldn't work, couldn't do anything, and my headache was gone instantly. But you have to remember too, now this was maybe 1989, 1988, it was a long time ago, sometime back then. And so who was teaching acupuncture back then? Who was telling us anything about this? So then that started my quest, and eventually met up with Dr. Kenny, the veterinarian at the racetrack. But isn't it amazing that you can take one needle and fix the entire body with that? And this man, to this day, I have no idea his name. I never did know his name. My friend took me. And it was the most interesting thing, but left an impact on me for so long. So after that, I started realizing, like, how can I make this difference in the horses? Of course, now I know the acupuncture point that he hit. I know that that particular acupuncture channel crosses the entire body. It starts at the inside of the eye and goes all the way to the little toe through the back. It helps for back pain. It helps for a lot of pain. I use it all the time on horses. Once I realized how beneficial acupuncture was and how much it helped me, and you know, sometimes we have to experience things before we believe in them, and I'm a skeptic, and I will not believe in anything till I've almost tried it. I don't know if that's always the safe way to do everything. You know, you can learn about something, but until you actually taste it, until you feel it, until you experience it, and until, like Dr. Shea, my professor, told me, until you become friends with this, you don't really know it. So I've become friends with acupuncture, and I can tell you I've become friends with the herbs. And so one of the things about the acupuncture that I learned is how many benefits it can help. Of course, you know, it's not going to fix a broken leg in 24 hours. It's not going to fix a broken leg in 6 weeks. You know, the body has to heal itself, but it can actually enhance healing. And so many of the cases people call me on are stories like, my horse was lame and I've spent $20,000 and I've spent so much money, and I had 2 bone scans, Carole, and I had, you know, is there anything you can do? We thought we would call you as a last resort. And I almost named my vet practice and my podcast the Vet of Last Resort. But, you know, I didn't really want to go there because I want it to be the first resort. The one story was this really, really, really nice gelding. He was a hunter. He had had a wonderful career, but all he had was this undescribed lameness in his left front leg. And nobody could figure it out. He'd had a bone scan, he'd had x-rays, he'd had injections, he'd had medications, he'd had shoe changes, he'd had time off, he'd had exercise. They couldn't find it. So these trainers called me and they said, Carole, like, what can you do to help this horse? I said, the only thing I can do is just use the skills from the acupuncture that I've learned and just discover what was going on. The acupuncture channels, just to give you a little bit of a window into what we do, they're kind of like highways on the road. So wherever you guys live, do you know your highways? Do you know in Florida, I-95, the Turnpike? If you're up around Orlando, you know I-4 crosses east and west. So imagine acupuncture channels in the body are these long energy pathways. And those energy pathways, they carry the information to the body. And amongst those energy pathways are spider webs of nerves. So those spider webs can be irritated and cause pain in an area. It doesn't mean that there's an injury in the area, it just means there's pain in that area. So when you have pain in the area, you have to relieve that pain. And the number one thing acupuncture does is relieve pain. Simple. So when everybody asks me, what does it do? I say it relieves pain. So particularly with me, I was covered in a headache. I was covered in pain. I was covered in despair. And it turned out in the end that I found community, I found a reason, I found a source to make me better. And that's another thing that I want to always tell you in my podcast is whatever you're covered in, please remember there is a solution and there is a source, mainly when it comes from love and love for what you do. So go out, Let me know your things. Let me know what you're covered in. Let me know anything about your life. Send me questions. I'd love to hear it. Have a great day.